Hey.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank our two guests, Ryan and
Relationships.
on this. What we'd like to do this evening is we're going to have a little bit of a strategy. What will happen is that we'll ask them to give a little bit of a history and actually personal touch to that history when they were here present for the 1970. Well, you weren't here for the installation.
No, I was gone, but I was here from 69 to the beginning of 71.
Wow, that's a beautiful history in itself. And Rama Charlotte was here, and we've been here now. We actually joined the month after.
No, I joined. I started coming as a guest to the temple a month after.
You actually came into the temple.
2 months we grabbed him.
2 months after the installation.
Roped him right in.
They were here. So we invited them to come and give us a little bit of discourse, a history, and the mood and the feeling of being here with Srila Prabhupada and the ecstasy of the devotees here in New York at that particular time. Just to say, we also invited Karanda Prabhu, and we invited Shalali Mataji, and Dynanda Prabhu. Due to circumstances, COVID, old age, and just couldn't get a flight here. This is what actually happened, so we don't have the other three panelists with us today. But they did leave a little bit something for us. We have like a video from Karanda Prabhu, and then we have something from Dynanda that I believe Romeshwar Prabhu is going to talk about what his experiences were at that particular time. And then we have a little something from Shalali also, who was at that time the premier Pujari. Because Prabhupada wanted everyone to come to New Dwarka and learn the art of deity worship. And she was there. That famous picture of her being next to Srila Prabhupada. Very glorious. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We're not going to see another 50. Maybe some of you might, you're really fortunate. But I thought this was a really nice scenario to bring this out for the future generations. We're going to video this. It'll be there for as long as it's going to last. And that, I think, will be very important for the future of New York and what it was like. It's always been very mystical for me, New York. When Vinny and I had the opportunity to come and work in New York, we were like super elated. We thought, what a boon. What a great opportunity to search the Prabhupada. And these devotees, they were here in the early days of this particular temple. So it's very exciting. I'm very happy. What we'll do is we'll start with a short little video, a 7-minute presentation of the installation of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. We'll start there, and then we'll ask our panelists to please give us their input. Is that good?
There are phones.
Sweet candy beat.
There's phones ringing.
Yeah, if you have a phone, please put it on mute, please. Okay. So if we could just, the panelists will
We're going to swing around.
Yeah.
Although we may not make it to the 100th, there is the 75th.
And we may take birth again. We'll catch it on the rebound.
Okay. All right, so we're ready to show that video. Just a second.
When I was in LA, I know Prabhupada had one.
Okay, we're ready.
Don't lock anybody. Sit.
Hare Krishna.
When I was in LA, I know Prabhupada had wanted us to carve some murtis of Radha Krishna. This is before we had installed any deities, and he was at the time trying to cast them in America to see if it could be facilitated. So he had Subal carve out a rough form of Radha Krishna, And then he asked Subal and myself to go to different foundries, all over. And we were very inexperienced. I didn't even know the right things to ask. So we'd go and we'd see Prabhupada, and he'd say, "So what intelligent information do you have for me today?" Because we usually taught him some nonsense. So then Prabhupada left and went to San Francisco. And then a while later, when he came back to San Francisco, he might have gone to India again. He wrote me a letter saying that he wanted to know what was happening with those murtis that we carved, and we should make sure he gets them, Eventually, he decided that they should be cast in India.
There was a program also that he had of a deity walk, where we would take the deities on Sunday and walk all around the whole block with the small deities. And we were asked to go into the houses in the early morning and ask people if we could take a flower from their garden. And then we would bring the deities around the back down the laneway and past his window. And he would stand up. I remember we'd all look forward to that. And he would look out of his window when he heard the kirtan coming. And we would all stand there for some time, jumping up and down, so happy to see him. And then we would go around, bring the deities to the front, and outside the temple, we would place the deities, and then each one of us would give a report. And this was quite shocking for me because I was such a new devotee, but you'd have to walk up in front of the deities with your hands folded and say, "My dear Lord, this is what I've done this week," and say what your service was, and so on and so forth. It was such a spontaneous kind of a mood to talk to the deities like that. At first I was a little shocked, but I grew to quite like that. And everyone in the temple would have to present themselves and say what they had done for the pleasure of the deities.
Prabhupada was fixed in his preaching mission, and that was his ecstasy. But every now and then, his internal emotions would bubble up sometimes. So usually Prabhupada would come and offer his obeisances to the three altars, and then he would come and sit on the Vyasasana, and we would offer obeisances, and we would still be in the process of bowing down, and he'd be sitting on the Vyasasana, and he would begin with the Sanskrit, Om Purnamada Purnamidam, the Sanskrit rolling out, and nothing came, there was nothing coming. So we all looked up, and Prabhupada was sitting and he was looking at the deities, and tears were just pouring down his eyes. He couldn't speak, just tears were pouring down his eyes. And it was the most far out thing, because then he pulled himself up straight, he took a deep breath, and you could tell he just suppressed, physically, just pushed it down and went on with his business. It was like Daruka, it was a disturbance to his service, But there was no question that Prabhupada was on the highest level. But he was so dedicated to his spiritual master, he would not let his personal ecstasy interrupt his service to his Guru Maharaj. And then one time Prabhupada was leaving. The Vyasasana was in the back, and there was a side door, and Prabhupada had his slippers right there. So Prabhupada went out, and he had his back to us, and he was just slipping on his slippers. I think someone was helping him slip them on. And he turned to us, and we were just sitting there with our mouths open, nobody moving. And Prabhupada said, "Yes, if I told you everything, you would faint." And then he walked up to his room.
Prabhupada invited all the other temple presidents to come and see the LA standard. And he wanted this standard to be introduced, especially with the deity worship, with the three altars. Prabhupada, when we got the building, Prabhupada went room to room and picked out what each room should be used for. Now, where you walk in now and there's a temple, that actually wasn't the temple that Prabhupada chose. Prabhupada had another vision that wasn't our vision. His vision was to have mainstream America come into that with their shoes on and sit in the pews and hear Bhagavad Gita and Kirtan on the stage. We put Prabhupada's Vyasasana on the stage, and he had Vishnu John play the organ. I even wanted to take out the stained glass, and Prabhupada said, "No, that must stay." He said, "Don't touch anything here." Even where the minister spoke, that was it called? A purport? Yeah. He kept that because he wanted devotees to come and speak too. It was so surreal to sit in the pew and hear Bhagavad Gita and hear Vishnu John singing Jayamadava on an organ. Even Prabhupada would play the organ. We would sit and he would play the organ. I wish there was tape recordings of that. Prabhupada saw that the American people were becoming disenchanted with their churches. He said, now I will enchant them with Krishna consciousness. So he thought, they're inclined to come to a church, let them come back to this church, but hear Bhagavad Gita and hear the kirtan. I mean, Prabhupada's vision was totally, he was thinking mainstream America, not hippies. Prabhupada's vision wasn't that we all become monks. You know, he wanted judges and politicians and doctors to come to the temple. They're not going to all become monks and shave up. But we had another vision, you know, come to the temple and shave up. But that wasn't Prabhupada's vision.
Prabhupada used to come in from the back of the temple room because his quarters were upstairs and there was a hall he came down. And we didn't have the big Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa then, we only had small Radha Krishna. And Prabhupada came in, and from the back of the temple room he looked and he called Shalavati over. Shalavati was the pujari. And he said, there's tilak in Krishna's eye. And she went and she looked and she couldn't see anything, and she came back to Prabhupada and said, no, there's tilak in Krishna's eye. And she looked and she looked and she looked, and right in the very, it was a tiny speck of tilak in Krishna's eye.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So now we'll ask the panel members to speak. Just another little thing. You know, in the material world, when somebody has done something for 50 years, it's actually a milestone. I mean, really. If a couple are married 50 years, or somebody's worked in the same job for 50 years, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Also, to worship the deities for 50 years is more than phenomenal. It's incredible because of the work and the service attitude it takes to accomplish that. Like devotees today working all day just to make this look beautiful for one day event, really, for Janmashtami. And look at how much labor and intensity goes into this activity for love of Lord Krishna and Shri Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, of course. But I would just like to say that the accomplishment, we should all be very proud of it, really. And Prabhupada he'd be very happy that this was continuing. And if you take a look at Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa today, you'll see the love and devotion of the devotees of New Dwarkadam.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I was in Jaipur some years ago, and actually it was the Jaipur temple in Vrindavan, and the pujaris, the deities were open. Picture someone sitting right by the hundi there, and with their back to the deity, they were reading the newspaper and eating prasadam right in front of the deities, and it was the pujari. And sometimes you go to Vrindavan and you see there'll be 4 or 5 sets of Radha Krishna deities on the altar. Prabhupada says each of those deities had their own temple. And with the temple, when you open a temple, all those shops in Vrindavan are all owned by the temples, and they pay some rent. And that's how they support the temple. So each temple had its income from cows and from land and from shops that it rented out, all that stuff. And the pujaris, the sevatas at the time thought, well, instead of running 4 temples, it's a lot cheaper to run 1 temple. Let's put all the deities on 1 altar in 1 temple, sell off all the land, get my sons and daughters married, and that's what happened to many, many of those places. So Prabhupada said, they think that my spiritual master has given me a great burden. And then Prabhupada said, he gave the example. So we can think like that. Oh, maintaining I have to do the artik, I have to cook the offering. You don't have to do anything. Go home to your mother, go on welfare. You don't have to do anything. we actually get that golden opportunity. So Prabhupada said, they were thinking that my spiritual master has given me a great burden. And he said, but if you think this is Krishna, let me take care of him. Prabhupada said, the deity will speak to you like Shakshi Gopal. How he was, he said, you come be the witness. The deity says, I can't walk. The devotee said, well, if you can talk, you can walk. Prabhupada said, in this way, he was defeated, So Krishna was defeated. So I just wanted to add on to what Swavas Prabhu was saying, that this was Prabhupada's world headquarters, and that it's been maintained so nicely in the beauty all over the world. I mean, you go to shops in South India or in Singapore, or I don't know where you are, they've got pictures of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. The calendars all over the pictures of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. So I just, along with Swavas, and of course Swavas and Tadit, who've been the temple presidents, and running the place for decades, I just wanted to say it is a wonderful thing. It's an amazing, rather than thinking it's a great burden, I think this is Krishna standing here. So, Hare Krishna.
My role is to share the history of our Los Angeles Yatra in its different... Okay. In its different growths and incarnations until we finally came to Watseka Avenue. And the temple in Los Angeles began in 1967. On Pico Boulevard. At that time in our movement, more or less every temple was a storefront that we were renting. And someone in each of those small storefront centers had to have a job to pay the rent. Dayananda had a job to pay the rent for the Pico Boulevard temple. We all know Jayananda drove a taxi to pay the rent in the San Francisco temple. Satsarup had a job to pay the rent in the Boston storefront. This was how our movement began, with these storefront temples. At the end of a lease, they moved, very interestingly, to a ground floor center on Hollywood Boulevard, right across the street from Grumman's Chinese Theater. And there were offices above this temple. And that lasted about 1 month. And the reason the landlord evicted them or asked them to leave is the tenants above, the people renting offices, were having a very difficult time with things like the chaunts, the fragrance of the temple, and the odors that were permeating that whole building. They just couldn't take it. They could not adapt. And so that was in 1968. They lasted 1 month, and then they moved to this house on La Cienega Boulevard. And we stayed in that house. Our movement stayed in that house. It was also rented, and Dayananda was supporting it for about 1 year and 2 or 3 months. And during that time, first, Shyam Sundar, who was in San Francisco, carved beautiful Jagannath deities and brought them down. Those were the first deities in the Los Angeles Yatra, of the Jagannath deities. And then later, in 1968, when they moved into La Cienega, Vishnu John, this is all before they were Maharajas, Vishnu John told Shilavati, who had joined in San Francisco when he made her a devotee. Her background is quite amazing. Her family was doing missionary work in Latin America. She was so pious, so devoted to God. She was just she's one of those souls that Prabhupada sometimes said, my spiritual master sent certain souls to help me, like Vishnu John was sent. like Mukunda was sent, and like Shilavati was sent, like Jamuna was sent. These are not ordinary souls that just became devotees. They are devotees in their last life for sure. And that was Shilavati. And so Vishnu John told her, I have the perfect place for you. And he just drove her to La Cienega and said, this is where you will serve. Thank you, Krishna, for that. So then the small deities arrived, and they were not yet called Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. They were called Radha Krishna. The Radha Krishna deities around the movement had Radha Krishna names. In fact, it was very unusual to not have Radha Krishna names for Radha Krishna deities. But that changed here in New Dwarka. We'll get to that in a moment. So, throughout the end of 1969 and early 1970, we had approximately 26 temples around the world. And they all had their own programs, their own schedules, when they started, what tunes they sang. I mean, it was a big thing when Govindadasi introduced the worship of Tulsi, and Prabhupada asked that to be brought to every temple. But as Prabhupada was contemplating the growth of his movement, he decided, I want a world headquarters that will become the model for every temple that exists now and to come in the future. I want a model temple that deserves to be called my world headquarters. And when this location was found and Prabhupada accepted it, he asked different temples and different temple leaders to contribute to acquiring for the down payment. This was truly a world effort. This temple was bought in February of 1970. That's when they moved from La Cienega into Watseka Avenue. And while they were at La Cienega, Srila Prabhupada had a house right across the street. And practically every day, he was teaching Shilavati standards of deity worship that we can't even imagine if we just try to think, what is deity worship? Prabhupada had the most in-depth knowledge of how he wanted the deities polished and bathed in the standards of cleanliness, and how he wanted 6 artiks a day. No temple was doing that. I mean, every single thing that Prabhupada wanted for deity worship in our movement, he was teaching Shilavati at La Cienega. She would go over to his house. You can even see photos of them where Prabhupada is watching her meticulously, attentively watching how she did the preparation and the dressing of the small Radha Krishna, now Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa deities. So when this temple was acquired, this was right around the time, another month or so later, Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion had finally come out. So look how everything was coming together. You have a world headquarters where Prabhupada's going to establish standards. You have the Nectar of Devotion that's going to teach the science of those standards. So then Prabhupada wrote letters to all of the 26 temples. And he told all of them, all of you, send groups, come to this new world headquarters. I plan to spend some days here. I will be here answering your questions, but you will be taught the exact temple schedule, morning program, evening program. You will be taught exactly how I want deities to be worshipped. You will be taught exactly what tunes I want sung for the deities. You will be taught how I want everyone going on street Harinam Sankirtan, on and on. Prabhupada was planning. You will be taught in the morning program how to chant Sanskrit slokas from the Bhagavatam class. None of this existed until Prabhupada established this standard. This is what he wanted New Dwarka to be. And all of us who have ever been here and ever want to be here, we have this amazing spiritual obligation to continue New Dwarka exactly the way Prabhupada wanted it to be and what he wanted it to be for the movement. That is our eternal duty, to be as Prabhupada's followers. So he had Vishnu John teaching the devotees tunes. He had Vishnu John taking them out every day on Sankirtan, teaching them how to play the instruments on street Sankirtan. Shalavati's teaching of deity worship. Many of you have never had personal contact in the kitchen with Jamuna. But if you had, and if you saw her standard, her cleanliness, it would be beyond your imagination. So in the same way that Jamuna had that standard for cleanliness in cooking, Shalavati had been trained and introduced that standard for deity worship. Pradyumna was here chanting verses. I mean, the whole movement came to New Dwarka to learn how to have morning, evening programs, do Sankirtan, chant verses, everything that makes us devotees. That's what New Dwarka taught this whole world. So that's part of the history of where we're sitting right now.
So,
Hare Krishna.
so can we hear something from Bhadranayan Maharaj?
Well, I can lead on that. Shalavati told me personally, I came to Watsika. I came to La Cienega in the summer of '69. And Prabhupada was giving the Sunday feast talk and so many things. And then, just so you know the time frame, and then they moved here this was the new temple on Watsika. And Prabhupada was finishing Nectar of Devotion in Krishnabuk from here. And so I was here from '69 as a guest. Then I was in Laguna Beach, living in Laguna Beach at the temple, and I was coming here from 70 to about, halfway through 71. So that's the time span. So Shalavati told me personally, just to show what an exemplary person she was, that she was in Golden Gate Park and completely frustrated with what's the meaning of life, and people are just suffering, first to work, then you drop dead. Well, what's it all about? Is there anyone who's happy? And they call it what the zero moment. And she was thinking, there's no one happy. There's no purpose or meaning. And then she said, I'm going to commit suicide. That's the only way out of this place. And if there's God, because Ramaswara is saying she's born raised in a Christian family, so she was praying intensely. If you're there, if you're real, you show me someone who's happy. And not this flickering flash in the pan, happiness based on conditions. Someone who's truly spiritually happy. You show me someone. Otherwise, I'm going to commit suicide. She's sitting on a bench in Golden Gate Park. And just then, over the hill, just like a movie, she hears ching, 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 ching. And it's Vishnu Jan Swami leading Kirtan. And she looked at Vishnu Jan Swami and said, that's it. Fell in, and the rest was history. There's so many things we could say, so I'll bounce around a bit, just about standards. I was living in Laguna Beach, and Prabhupada would have temple presidents come. So our temple president was Durlab. And they would come and have lunch with Prabhupada, and they'd get to ask questions, and about standards. Prabhupada was training. I'll get back to Durlab, but let me just throw this one in. At this point, I'll go back to to La Cienega later on, but living here in the Brahmacharya ashram was where the store was. And we had no concept, there was no personal clothing. You just threw it, living in the Brahmacharya ashram, everything was in a barrel, and they just threw it in the laundromat. The concept of folding, what to speak of ironing, folding was not even an issue. So everything just came out of the dryer and was thrown into this barrel. And when you came home, or whatever you were doing, if you got late, everything that fit you was gone. So, we had giant guys squeezing into smalls, small guys in tents, forget matching socks, that wasn't even an issue. So you can imagine. Now, we used to chant in front of Bullock's downtown, and there was a restaurant on top, and we'd be chanting there, Vishnu John Swami just singing his heart out. He used to put a glove on, then he'd put a nut, like a metal nut, and then wrap tape around it, put another glove over it, tape it again, because he'd play the drum for 6-8 hours, and his fingers would just shred, So we had Vishnu John Swami just singing his heart out. There was drunks would come out of the alley and try to dance with us. There was a brothel on the other side, down a couple blocks over. They would come over and try to dance with us. There was a Christian marching band with trombones that set up next to us playing when the saints come marching in. So we got the drunks, we've got the prostitutes. There was the buses would stop there, and every time they'd pull out, a billow of diesel fume. So you had the drunks, the prostitutes, the Christian marching band, the diesel, whatever. And on top, at the restaurant on top of the department store, Bullock's, people would get cups of coffee and put the lid on it. It was an outdoor patio there, and throw them off the roof, and they'd hit you, they'd explode on the ground. You get hit with a cup of coffee. So it was a tough scene. And we're there chanting for hours, and I remember Vishnu John Swami just singing his heart out in the middle of this circus. And somebody yelled, we've all heard it, "Why don't you just go home?" Vishnu John said, I'm trying, back home, back to Godhead. So someone sent pictures of us on this Harinam, and Prabhupada wrote a letter back. Typical, one of those fantastic letters that I see you like angels of Vaikuntha, and this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. So just full of encouragement. Now remember, nobody had full iron clothes. Everyone wore whatever. And Prabhupada then wrote in his own hand, it was on the letter, in his own hand, he wrote, P.S. I understand that you're renounced, but for my sake, please dress nicely. And we looked at the picture. Oh, he's got a point there, We never even thought of it, So, just one last thing, and somebody else can say. But about standards. So I promised I'd get back to Durlab. So Durlab was transcendentally frugal, parsimonious as a church mouse. And we had no money in those days anyway. He said that, okay, we're going to stop using ghee. We're going to cook in peanut oil. And, we were young brahmacharis and, always hungry. So we went on a nonviolent non-cooperation. We didn't, finally, we said, all right. You ask Prabhupada. If Prabhupada says peanut oil, we would eat motor oil. But you got to ask Prabhupada. So up in this room, and Prabhupada, the temple presidents and whoever, senior devotees from all over, they were taking prasadam. And so that when it came time for question and answer, Durlab said, Prabhupada, can we cook in peanut oil? Prabhupada said, it's not so first class. So conversation went on, and eventually Durlab got a chance again and said, but Prabhupada, if we eat in peanut oil, we can save so much money. Prabhupada said, it's not so first class. Durlab was determined, came around again a third time. He said, Prabhupada, but if we cook in peanut oil, we can save money and send more to the BBT. Prabhupada said, cook in any damn thing you like. We're not over. But, when Prabhupada would say that, he wasn't affirming. He was just saying, how many times are you going to ask me the same question? You're going to get the same answer. So Prabhupada said, cook in any damn thing you like. So Durlap thought, hey. And everybody was, the conversation went on. And then when it was breaking up and Durlap was walking out the door, Prabhupada said, but I know one man who ate too many pakoras cooked in peanut oil. What do you say? What happened? Prabhupada said, he died the next day. That was it for peanut oil. We never saw it again. I mean, I can say more, but we
Well,
can go back
at
and
this
forth.
particular
We can go
junction,
back and forth.
why don't we play that video that we have with Shilavati speaking?
Yeah.
It would be really appropriate.
Let me just say one more thing
Sure,
about
Maharaj.
Shilavati, though. The Brahmacharya ashram was up here, where the store is now. There was no Mangal Artik. I don't know what time we got up.
Not yet.
Yeah, there wasn't a Mangal Arti yet. But we heard, and I was saying young men always hungry, that if you went to the flower market, I think it was once a week, maybe twice a week, if you went to the flower market downtown, which we had to be there like 3 o'clock in the morning, I forget what time, it was early. And we got, 3, 4 o'clock, something like that, no later. And when who wants to get up at that time in the morning? But we said, but when you get back, there's some great sweets. So, hey, sign me up. So off we went, and when we came back, Shilavati would greet us, and she'd give us burfi and sandesh and kheer, which we never saw in those days. And I remember asking, I asked her, where does this come from? And there was Mangal Artik, and we never knew there was a Mangal Artik. But Shilavati was performing Mangal Arti, and sometimes she would be crying and offering the Arti because there was nobody there. We were all sound asleep. So it gives you a flavor of Shilavati.
I
Okay,
just
so
want to say two
let's show
things
that
about
video.
Shilavati before you see this video.
Yeah.
First, she's at an advanced age, and this video interview is just from a few days ago. So this is not Shilavati in 1970. This is Shilavati in 2021.
She was a strong personality.
But her voice, when I first heard this, that's the same voice. It's amazing.
I believe she's like 89 years old.
And the other thing I wanted to say about Shilavati is the way she worked. It was so tireless, so hard. It's hard to describe what our schedules were back many, many years ago. But she was almost proud of saying, whenever Prabhupada was in the temple room and the devotees were gathering around him, that wasn't me. I was on the other side of the curtains working for Prabhupada. That's how she describes her life with Prabhupada. She's that type of soul, selfless soul.
Yeah, I think I heard that she was the kind of individual that always was in the background. Like if there was things going on out here, she'd always be in the back doing
Always,
service.
but working, never
Yeah,
never
and
idle. I mean, her standards were beyond anything I could do. One last thing, Maladi told us, it's so interesting that she's staying at New Vrindavan now. And what Maladi does is sets up a chair in front of their beautiful deities. She said Shilavati sits there for hours, just looking at those deities with such love. I mean, she's in a trance. This is Shilavati.
Which goes to show.
She's a divine person.
Which goes to show, there's that verse in the Upanishad that even if I forget you, don't forget me. It's a fact that whatever devotional service, it fructifies, and Krishna doesn't forget. So whatever she's been through here she is at Radha Vrindavan Chandra's lotus feet.
Yeah.
So hang in there, Prabhus. Whatever happens, it'll pay off. Don't worry.
It's true because I heard that her motto was, work now, samadhi later.
Well, there it is.
So it's in
So she
later,
got the chance
and
for
now
samadhi.
she's in samadhi. She used to work like anything. Okay, so we'll show this video now. It's quite long. It's about 25 minutes long.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. It's my wonderful pleasure to introduce, actually, how can you introduce somebody that everybody already knows? Shilavati Devi Dasi. Please welcome her.
Here I am.
So we're here in my office in New Vrindavan, and because she couldn't make it to LA, so she could make it to my office. And I'll ask her a few questions. And the first question is, who did you first meet who introduced you to Krishna consciousness?
Okay. Well, that was a, how do you say, a really important moment. It's very clear in my mind. I haven't forgotten it. And since I'm talking to people in Los Angeles, you must know of Vishnu John. It's because he was there for a long time, and Hopa was there a lot, and but this is the beginning, the first time.
Was it LA or San Francisco?
This was San Francisco.
Yeah.
And yeah. In fact, Malati was in this. She doesn't.
Well, I remember you coming.
You do?
Oh, yeah. Because you were older than all of us.
Yeah, right.
So we were wondering, what does this old lady want?
Yeah. But I persevered.
You did.
I was, him, Vishnu John, we were both at a Jewish Shabbos. It was a Friday night, Saturday night, and we had both walked out. He went out, and I went out, and I was walking behind him. That's as I remember it. We were near the park, Golden Gate Park. And at one point, he stopped, and I stopped, and he just said to me, "Follow me. I'm going to take you to where you belong, to a place where you belong." And I remember he gave me a paper, some kind of little paper that had some stuff on it. And I was so nervous that I dropped it, and it fell, and I really down, picked it up, and he said, "That's a good sign." And so I followed him, and we went to the place where the temple wasn't a temple. It was.
It was a temple.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. I don't.
That was 518 Frederick Street.
Yeah. It must have. I don't remember. What I do remember is that I returned there the next day for a morning thing. And for me, it was the morning thing. They had breakfast. And at the time, this is the way I thought it. They sing a lot. I didn't know what was going on, but he didn't pay much attention to me after that. It just, it was up to me whether I was going to keep on going. And so somebody told me to come back later on in the day. The Prabhupada, it was like 7 o'clock or something, and Prabhupada was there, and he was sitting on a chair like this, and he was talking. Well, I didn't understand anything that he was talking about, except that he was just, I never saw anybody like him. And so I knew, it began to work in my head that I was someplace special. And so I, telling myself to pay attention to everything that's going on. And so it turns out that Malati was there, and Jamuna, and so singing, and I just kept going there, and I can't remember all of it. I remember Prabhupada, them giving Prabhupada an apple, and he had a little knife or something that he and he throw pieces of that apple out to the right. Isn't that what happened? That's the way I remember it. And the young man, they kind of fought for catching this piece of apple that's coming through. I thought it was a lovely thing, but I had no understanding of why. But there was the deity. What was the
Jagannath.
Jagannath.
He was up high.
Yeah, they were in a corner, like, right? Wasn't it just a corner?
On the far end of the temple.
Yeah, right, over there. Like, and I couldn't stop looking at him because I had never seen anything like this before, and I saw, he had his great big eyes, and I thought that, wow, he must have come from someplace else. This is not, from San Francisco, and but I was just captured, and him, the funny looking thing, but he was so beautiful. I thought he was really, really beautiful. And that might have been a thing that kept me returning, because I returned the next morning and then the next evening, and Prabhupada was there. I don't remember how long that went on. But at some point, Vishnu John talked to me about going to see Prabhupada and getting, what is the word?
Initiated.
Getting what?
Initiated.
Getting initiated. And I remember this very well. Because I still didn't know what he was saying or what this was all about. I didn't, it's just, I didn't know. And but it was all pretty nice, It was something really, really different. And so he took me up to this apartment where Srila Prabhupada was, and opened the door, and somebody and then left me with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting behind the desk, and he started talking to me, and I had been reading a lot in the Catholic saints, and I was taken with Francis of Assisi, and he didn't say anything like that, and so finally I decided to say something because he was talking, and I interrupted him, and I asked him about Francis of Assisi. Did he know about him? How did he fit in this? And what he said to me was, every moment that a devotee goes out on the street, he is in danger. And this was an answer to Francis's, whatever Francis did, is crazy.
Like his preaching? Like that was an answer to Francis of Assisi's preaching, that when he went out on the street there would be danger.
Yeah. I took it as this was the same thing, Francis went out in the
That's okay. Somebody was trying to call in, so it threw the recording off. So when and where did you finally initiate?
I don't remember, but I do remember that it was outside. And it was on the sidewalk, and there were other people there, and well, I was just going along with it, I was just being. I wanted to know what was happening. There was something here that was attracting me, but I honestly have to say I didn't know what it was. And then there was another time, and I don't know if this happened, when this happened, but I was in the park, San Francisco, the Golden Gate Park, and this big trail of people dressed kind of funny. This could have been before all that happened. I don't know. I don't remember, but it was at the park, and yeah. He had a stroke or something?
Yes, Srila Prabhupada did.
Okay, so when was that?
It was in Labor Day of '67.
Okay.
But he was in New York, and then he came back to San Francisco.
Okay. Well, I remember seeing him and recognizing that he'd had a stroke, or there was something on his face, and like, well, how come he's got that? It was kind of like that. Yeah, this is mixed up. I don't know when it happened.
You would have seen him, he came back to San Francisco. It was in July of 67. And we had the Rath Yatra, so that might have been people, following. But he didn't come to the Rath Yatra. He was in Stinson Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day we brought the deities to see him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not very good at that.
Can you recall when you went to Los Angeles?
Los Angeles.
How you got there?
I got there. How did I get to Los Angeles? I can't remember.
Okay. Seeing for the first time the deities, because now it was, instead of Jagannath, it was Radha and Krishna deities. And you were, I recently saw a video of you assisting and dressing, but I was just trying to look it up and I can't find it.
Oh, yeah. That was a big thing. They had somebody built a kind of
Radha and Krishna, Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, they had their installation. So you remember the day that?
yeah, and what I don't remember is, see, we had little tiny ones.
Yeah.
And I was doing,
Dressing them?
yeah, by this time, we made a big leap here from San Francisco to Los Angeles. I don't.
And Prabhupada was showing you something about the deities.
Yeah, we were in. He was there. He was sitting on the floor, or maybe they had a chair for him. And I was next to him, and he was telling me how to do it, what to do. And I thought that I was really something. Because, nobody there was really concerned with the deities, because they were still concerned with getting it right, getting the money, getting it built, getting it together. But here, this place where they are now had been a church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Whereas the other place had been a
storefront?
The one in San Francisco was a
storefront.
Storefront, yeah, little store. And there was, well, okay, here's something I remember. This was I think this was Los Angeles before they had the big one. So there was a smaller one that had been a church too. And there is a devotee, what was it, had been a taxi cab.
Jayananda.
But now here's another person that was just like oh, from another planet. Just like Vishnu John, that's how he thought about him. He came from someplace else. And Jaya Tirtha, that's it.
There was Jaya Tirtha and Jayananda, yeah.
Yeah,
So Jaya Tirtha was very involved with the deities.
yeah. And he took care of everybody. Real, Sunday nights, every Sunday there was the thing that people would come and have the sun, right? And there was always a lot of food left over. Those brahmacharis, they were in the kitchen cooking, and they were just really happy. They just loved it. They're cooking also. And they always cook too much. And so, what's his name?
Well, there was Jayananda and Jaya Tirtha. Jaya Tirtha was connected with LA, and Jayananda had been in San Francisco.
And Jayananda, he collected all the remnants of the food after, and at the end, later, and I thought that this was, incredible, and then this was before people were homeless, and then it was before the big thing, and he would get it all together and get some of the brahmacharis with him, and they would get in a truck and they would go and find these people who were starving. And that really impressed me. I never saw anything like that.
Hare Krishna.
It was,
We can see it's very difficult to understand the audio.
I
We didn't get this until just a few hours ago, literally. But anyway, I think we get the idea. In her age, she probably just can't really remember very much, which I'm sure all of us will be inflicted with sooner or later. But anyway, let's stop there and let's continue on. Maybe we can ask Rameshwar to speak for a little bit more about history of New Dwarka.
I wanted to say one or two things about Shilavati. First of all, I haven't seen her since, I guess it was 73 when she left LA to go to Dallas. So it's been a long time. And we searched for her. And it's just recently that we found her. And she's now with Maladi in New Vrindavan. When Shilavati was here, after being trained by Prabhupada, and she was like his loving daughter. He had selected her to be the teacher of deity worship for every temple. So when Prabhupada started inviting the temple presidents and leaders to come to New Dwarka to be trained, they didn't know what to expect. So Shilavati would be in the pujari rooms, and someone would show up from a temple, she wouldn't let them in. The first thing she would say is, when was the last time you bathed? Have you bathed? Did you put on fresh new dhoti and kurta? Fresh new tilak? I don't see that. I mean, immediately, she was teaching standards that they didn't even have a clue about. That when you go before Krishna in his deity form, you can't just be wearing street dhoti and kurta. I mean, you have to put on new clothes, be bathed, everything. That's how Prabhupada taught her to teach everyone in our movement about deity worship. It was extraordinary. And if somebody tried to come in to the pujari rooms and she saw that they weren't properly clean, she would stop them. She was very firm about it. She took it so seriously that Prabhupada was introducing how you're supposed to be when you go before God. You have to understand, after this training, Prabhupada spent throughout 1970, leading up to 71 in our installation of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, Prabhupada was installing big deities in temples all over the world, following the training that they received here in New Dwarka. In fact, Prabhupada was going to be the one who was going to install the deities, Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, but his schedule didn't permit it. But he had brought Karandar to Boston when he installed the big deities in Boston. And he taught everyone who was watching him whenever he did an installation exactly what the ceremony was, the ceremonial procedures, the way you bathe the deities, the way you prepare all the preparations. It was so pucka, so first class. So when Prabhupada could not change his schedule for Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, he wrote to Karandar and said, I am authorizing you to do it, but you must do it exactly as I showed you the ceremony in Boston. So I'm telling that story because every detail Prabhupada was in charge of. Every single detail. Just like when you heard on the tape when Ramananda was describing how we first got this building, and Prabhupada went into every room to tell the devotee, this is what this room will be. This is what this will be. In his quarters, Bhavananda was there with Karandar. This is how I want my quarters decorated and these rooms to be used. Every detail. He was telling Karandar, these are the measurements for the altars. This is what I want. I want 2 doors in front of each altar. I mean, there wasn't one detail of setting up New Dwarka that Prabhupada did not directly instruct. Even his garden, told Karandar how he wanted him to dig out the perimeter, to do plant. I mean, every part of New Dwarka has Prabhupada's touch on it. So I wanted to share that with you.
Brigu had a question, but
What statement is that? I can't hear you.
do you know Gargamuni well? That's generally his theme. Generally his theme, that's just, Prabhupada came to this temple room. He loved it. He appreciated it. He came many, many, many times. Prabhupada never said, why did you do this? I want you back over here, Prabhupada did like those seats. There's no question about it. I'll tell you a story about this temple room, where the temple room used to be. I was a guest. I hadn't moved into the temple yet. And, had all my ideas of what this saint, this so many things. So, Prabhupada's Vyasa-san was here. Devotees on this side, devotees on this side, and the deities here. And when Prabhupada finished his talk, he asked for questions. And all of a sudden, this, as Prabhupada would say, not quite in order, this behemoth of a man, all disheveled street person, mumbling, and it became lumbering towards Srila Prabhupada. And he's coming right down that aisle, right at Prabhupada's Vyasa-san. And I was a guest. I was like, what's this all about? And everybody was so stunned, they were frozen. And he got about, even closer than you, but he got to Prabhupada's Vyasa-san. Everyone was stunned. And Prabhupada went, stop! Everybody froze. And then Prabhupada pointed to Brahmananda sitting by the Vyasa-san. He said, do you see this man? And it was just like the movies. Everybody went, whoosh, looked at Brahmananda, whoosh, looked at Prabhupada, whoosh, looked back at the big guy. So Prabhupada said, do you see this man? Everybody looked at him. Prabhupada said, if I tell him to, he will kill you. And the guy sat down, and Prabhupada went on like nothing had happened. And I thought, man, I've never seen anything like that. I was, whether it was Shanti Shanti, or I was, run for your mother, Prabhupada was so cool and handled it so expertly. So that was over in this temple room.
Yeah, I want to tell you one thing that Shalavati introduced. Do you have that photo of Prabhupada training her? It's not able to be posted. Such a beautiful photo. Anyway, what Shalavati introduced was just as the curtains were opening in the old temple room, remember Prabhupada's introducing Mangal Artik. He's introducing 6 artiks a day. I mean, all of this was on Shalavati and being done there. So she had 2 types of incenses. One was frankincense, which just was so overpowering. And there was another incense, I don't know if it's myrrh, I don't know which one it is, that creates a tremendously fragrant smoke in churches. She had those incenses so that when you opened up
It billowed out.
It billowed out and filled that whole temple room in there, and devotees just were intoxicated.
I'll give you another example of standards. How it was wild. Nayana Baram, who was a colorful character,
Yes.
he thought instead of just offering a flower, why not offer one of those 4th of July sparklers? So they sent a picture to Prabhupada. He was offering this, it was 4th of July. Prabhupada said, no, it should smell nice. Not gunpowder.
Maybe we could next ask Rabindranath Prabhu if he would like to give a little description of the old temple where the museum is located now.
So in the old temple room where the museum is right now, there is 3 altars, separate altars. One, when I came here in 71, there was big gornitai, just big gornitai, and they were made out of paper mache. There were different deities than we have right now. And we didn't have deities of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta. There's photographs of them. And there were no small deities of gornitai either. And then on the middle altar was Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa and Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. And on the last altar was just Jagannath. The old deities we had of Jagannath. And we didn't have any small deities of Jagannath either. And on the ceiling, I think it was an A-frame. The room had an A-frame on it. And we just had a cloth on the ceiling. Kind of canopy. Yeah, chandeliers. I think the same chandeliers we have here. We just moved them in here. And sometimes the fear was that may catch on fire. I remember the temple commander, Kadamba Kannada, one initiation, he was there with the fire extinguisher just in case it would catch on fire. And Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa-san was facing directly Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa, and there's just one floor, of course. And so the Matajis would keep the center aisle empty, and the women would dance on Gornitai's side, and the men would dance on Jagannath's side. And we had Mangal Artik. I remember Mangal Artik, at least in the beginning when I came, they just would play kartals softly, because if they played a madranga, it would disturb the neighbors. We had one neighbor right behind. They have a big apartment building, but before there were houses. And one particular, and the person that lived there was very agitated. But
Every temple has one. It's not bona fide unless you have an agitated neighbor.
So we had a longer schedule for the deities. Like right now, things like we would worship the deities. Of course, they would get up at 3:30 in the morning, and then the last artik was at 9 o'clock. And then the doors would close at 9:30, and then at that time we would start dressing the deities. So the pujaris may get out of there at like 10:30, and it's a little. We would offer the Mangal Artik sweets. We would offer, the kheer and the rabri, and We also would offer fruits in the plate too for Mangalarti, but then we were told Prabhupada said just milk sweets, so we're doing that. And we had one kitchen. There was no deity kitchen, and we cooked everything for the deities in the one kitchen we have here.
Can I throw in a quick story about this kitchen? Prabhupada used to walk around the temple and check things out, you know? So Stoka Krishna was the cook at that point. And Stoka Krishna was just chancing the dal. You know, a big pot of dal, 10 chilies in it, you know. I was there scrubbing pots, little Bhakta Bob was, you know, the sink was in the corner right by the door. And everybody's coughing and wheezing, and all of a sudden the door opened, and it was Prabhupada. I think his servant, Devananda or Kartikeya, whatever, was with him. And Prabhupada peeked in. He saw everybody coughing, wheezing, sneezing. He said, just like India. Shut the door, and off he went.
Yeah, so we just
Pretty far out. You never knew when Prabhupada was going to show up, you know.
So we just had one kitchen for the deities and the devotees, the same thing. And the deity kitchen we have right now in the corner, they used to be Golden Avatars Productions. Krishna Kani would produce Prabhupada's tapes for the tape ministry. And it was very strict, like we're saying, Ramachar was saying how Shilavati was very strict about coming into the Bajari room. Actually, the Bajari room was in part of the kitchen. One of the rooms where they roll out the chapatis, that was a Bajari room. And I remember as coming here as a guest, devotees would tell me, so, once they told me, go in the kitchen and do some service. So I went in there, and I opened the door, you know, to go in, and one devotee saw me there, and I think it was Mathura Mohan, and he said, you can't come in. Are you wearing tilak? Do you have neck beads on? You can't come in here. So that was a standard, you know, you had to be very clean and everything. And I remember when I joined Prashadam, we would have, you know, like oatmeal and fruit and chickpeas and ginger root. And we had these wax papers that we would eat on. And on the corner of the wax paper would be a Mahaprashadam from Mangalarti. So a little piece of burfi, some kheer like that.
I have a quick story about the Mahaprashadam. I was a skinny little brahmachari, and I was given the key, because they used to lock up all the offerings, whatever the pujaris didn't abscond with, but they used to lock up the prasadam and the Mahaprashadam and serve it out at breakfast. It was all stocked up, at least that when I was here. So, and the kitchen was where there was a prasadam hall, used to be right where one of the kitchen, you know, it was one of those rooms. So we used to lock up the Mahaprashadam, and I had the key. I was given the key. That was one of my assignments. And it came to pass that when they would open up the Mahaprashadam for breakfast, it was all gone. All the dishes were back, washed and clean, but empty. And I'm the only one with the key. Talk about a smoking gun, you know. And it's not, I'm not doing it. So it happened several times in a row. And I'm the only one with the key. So Karandar, this is how important Mahaprashadam was in those days. I'll tell one other quick story about Mahaprashadam, then we'll go back to because I think if we mix it up, it keeps you all awake. So anyway, Karandar got his sleeping bag and slept in the Mahaprashadam room. And what was happening was Kunja Bihari and another devotee named Jai Gopal, because the cabinet was 2 doors like this, locked here. So you can't open it, because they would knock out the pins on each side of the hinges, and the doors would just come out, still locked. They would eat everything. I don't know how they would eat everything, but being Brahmins, they washed everything and put it back, and they'd put it back up and put the pins back in. And Karandar caught them. And on La Cienega, Prabhupada used to take the Sunday, there was a little side room, and Prabhupada would take prasadam with, you know, the only sannyasi was Kirtananda in those days. And they would take prasadam in a little side room. And they'd give Prabhupada a plate, and he would sample everything. He'd take a bite out of it. And sometimes he would take a bite out of a samosa or a gulab jamun, and then he would distribute it. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I wasn't here, but Tamal told me the story personally, that Prabhupada took a bite out of a gulab jamun, Sunday feast, they're all sitting there. He took a bite out of a gulab jamun and put it on Tamal's plate. So Tamal Krishna, Maha Prasadam, and he was just relishing it. And he finished off one plate and transferred it, finished off a second plate, transferred it, And at one moment, a moment's inattention, he was looking at Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada's here, he was here, and one of the cohorts of Kunja Bihari, a devotee named Jai Gopal, who was a famous prasadam thief. So you had Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Jai Gopal. So Tamal, with that gulab jamun on his plate, half eaten by Prabhupada, he was looking at Prabhupada's ear. Tamal said that, Prabhupada's ear was shaped like Lord Buddha, all auspicious signs. And then he was thinking how it's perfectly shaped like a transcendental radar dish for catching Shabda Brahman's spiritual sound vibration. So he was meditating on Prabhupada's ear. At that moment, Jai Gopal reached over, grabbed the half gulab jamun and ate it. Tamal says he grabbed the guy by the shirt and he was just about to whack him right in front of Prabhupada. But he said he had the wherewithal to ask Prabhupada, Prabhupada, can I hit him? Can I hit him? Prabhupada said, what did he do? He said, Prabhupada, he stole my gulab jamun. Prabhupada said, Vaikuntha qualifications. Then Prabhupada said there's two types of devotees. There's devotees who distribute prasadam, and there's devotees who steal prasadam. And Prabhupada said, and they're both transcendental. So that's the prasadam.
Sorry, I have a quick prasadam story too. Around the middle of 1972, I had a real heart-to-heart talk with Shilavati. I was a Sankirtan leader, and Mahaprasadam was the most guarded treasure in the temple. And I proposed to her that she would let me offer a Maha plate, full Maha plate, to the biggest book distributor of the week. And we had a real heart-to-heart conversation, and she agreed to, and she started arranging for me to have Mahaprasadam plates for the book distributors leading up to the first Christmas marathon.
I was thinking, what did you do for the scores?
Oh, those devotees were just competing so intensely to get the Maha.
Those devotees, including Rameshwar, he set a record of $365
just to get the Maha. Well, just to please Prabhupada.
Just as a quick one, Tamal told me we're a little off field, but just to nail prasadam. Tamal Krishna Maharaj told me, and there's pictures when Prabhupada was giving a tour of the Radha Damodar temple. I think it was 72, whatever, when they first took that wave of devotees. Prabhupada went back to Vrindavan. Yeah, no, it wasn't even the whole group, whatever. So he's giving a tour of the Radha Damodar temple, and you can still see it. If you go, there's the room that overlooks Rupa Goswami's Samadhi, and then there's that long room that Prabhupada uses as a bedroom. There's a beam, support beam, that goes up across the ceiling and down. And in that, the ceiling part, there was a rectangle, there was obviously a compartment there. So Tamal said, Prabhupada, what's that? Prabhupada said, the Goswamis used to hide things there. Tamal asked, what did they hide? Prabhupada said, probably prasadam. Actually, they used to keep some pens, some of their writing implements there, but Prabhupada understood.
Competing for prasadam is eternal.
It is still going on.
It's still going on. Dayananda told me that one of the things that Shilavati wanted to introduce in Prabhupada a lot, she liked the idea of big bells for each pujari as they were doing the archings. Prabhupada said,
we had those 4 bells. They were, remember that had a handle and 4 bells? It was a symphony.
That was Shilavati. Looked just like the incense. There's so many things she introduced. The way Dayananda described her, he said, here are her qualities. She was the most protective person on the planet over the deities. She was so protective.
Microphone.
Oh, meticulously protective. Because she was, Prabhupada told her, I want the highest standard that is possible of any human. That's what I want. And she took that to heart. Dayananda said she was also designing the deity clothes. She was so artistic. She was inventive and artistic. So these are some of her qualities. But because of the way she had these standards, Dayananda said this led to something that is very unique in our movement. I alluded to this earlier. All the Radha Krishna deities in our movement had names of Radha and Krishna. But when Prabhupada contemplated this world headquarters and these standards, and he was going to make this the model for the whole movement and have everyone come here and study how to do artiks, how to do a morning program, how to chant slokas, everything, what tunes to chant. He said, this is so opulent. I want this to be so opulent. I want the deity worship, everything to be so opulent. This will be like Krishna when he went to Dwarka. And therefore, I want to put this rumor to rest once and for all. It came from Prabhupada. The name New Dwarka. And from that came the name Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa and Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. That's coming directly from Srila Prabhupada. Dayananda was there when he proclaimed that. So I wanted to set that record straight on that. Yes.
Yeah, it's also in writing. We would send pictures of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa and Prabhupada, and he would say, thank you very, very much for sending me these pictures of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa. Sometimes at the Jayam prayers, he would say, Nu Dwarkadam Ki Jai. So there's no, misunderstanding. It's clear that he accepted that. And during Prabhupada's last days in Vrindavan, he said, it's right on tape, that I was in Los Angeles, but Dwarkadish wanted me to leave, but I understand he had a plan for me. So he just said out of the blue. Nobody asked him. He just said it out of the blue.
I want to just mention one other thing about Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa and New Dwarka. Prabhupada's godbrothers never understood Prabhupada. To this day, they don't understand him. None of them ever fully understood our Prabhupada. And one of the things that they couldn't understand is, how do you take Radha and Krishna deities and not name them for Radha Krishna Leela in Vrindavan? How could Prabhupada do this? It's like when they said, how could Prabhupada have brahmacharinis? Or how could Prabhupada just make it 16 rounds? I mean, there were so many things about Prabhupada that they just did not get. And his naming this temple and his naming these deities, they did not get.
I could add on. I don't want to. Let me just say it this way. There was criticism that in Vrindavan, Prabhupada installed Krishna Balaram. It must mean that Prabhupada is only up to friendship and not, I mean, first off, that's so far beyond our pay grade, and but Prabhupada said two things. He said, this is Raman Reti, this place. Prabhupada said, every afternoon, Krishna and Balaram come through here around 3 o'clock with the cows and cowherd boys. So, I mean, that's pretty far out. So it's according to the Leela style, according to the place you name the deity, so Krishna Balaram. And then Prabhupada also said, because Prabhupada was a transcendental strategist, with his burning compassion and his meditation at every moment, how to turn these people to Krishna. I mean, that's Prabhupada's every fiber of his being. Somehow, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas to capture, There's somebody's getting away, the impersons, let me capture them, So Prabhupada said, there are so many Radha Krishna temples in Vrindavan. If you open another Radha Krishna temple, that's, But if you open a Krishna Balaram temple, then people will come, oh, it's something new. So according to the Leela place, and according to his transcendental strategy, Prabhupada installed Krishna Balaram. He also, established right next to them beautiful Radha Shama Sundar. He also established dozens of sets of Radha Krishna deities around the world. So, they missed that whole part. But so the point is that Prabhupada knew how to attract people, and he had different places at different moods. After all the battles in Juhu, Prabhupada said, we have New Vrindavan, we have New Jagannath Puri, we have New Dwarka, we can call this New Kurukshetra. So Prabhupada had his humor and his ras and his so many things, just like Ramaswamy was saying. So they just missed it.
There's one more thing.
One more thing
about Krishna Balaram. No, I just want to.
You go ahead.
Go ahead. Go
ahead.
Prabhupada and I had a really intense conversation in 1975 when he was opening the Krishna Balaram Mandir about how he wanted every year the devotees for the Mayapur festival would then go to Krishna Balaram. This is when he really emphasized going to both, first Mayapur, then Vrindavan.
You travel with us.
And I asked Prabhupada about this, and he said, and this is the part that his godbrothers really, I understand that they don't get. Prabhupada's temples were bases from which he sent out Sankirtan warriors in the heart of Kali Yuga cities all over the planet. This is beyond them. Only Prabhupada did this. And he told me, I want all of these Sankirtan devotees that come for the Mayapur festival, they must come and get strength from Balaram. That is why I want Krishna Balaram for the Sankirtan devotees to come back to the West, having the strength empowered from Lord Balaram and Krishna. That's what he told me personally as we were opening the Krishna Balaram.
Hari Bol!
Yeah, so we had Bashadam in the morning, and we had lunch at 1:15, which comprised of sabji, rice, dal, and chapatis every day. And then after that, we went on Harinam. Harinam, we went out 6 days a week. Every day after lunch, we went out for about 3 hours or so, and then we came back for the 7 o'clock Artik. The Artik now it's at 6:30. Before it used to be at 7 o'clock.
Hey, a quick one about that, going out. We used to go out, I remember who started it, I don't remember, but we used to go out all day on Harinam. We'd go out chanting downtown, and then in the evenings, the afternoons, we'd go door to door and try to sell Krishna books. That's a whole other, some other time. But we would take lunch in a park, and we'd have a nice packed lunch, chapatis, whatever it was. But we were in the park, and inevitably, some homeless people, some people in the park would come, and we would distribute all of our prasadam to them, because we thought, well, we're going to go back to the temple, we can get prasadam, and when will they ever see devotees again? So, but we were hungry young men giving away our lunch. So we were really torn. And our Sankirtan leader was a devotee named Vaidyanath. And Vaidyanath asked Prabhupada about this. What should we do? Should we distribute our prasadam or take prasadam? Prabhupada said, charity begins at home. That we should take our prasadam. And then Prabhupada had us make like bread rolls. We could take out little extra bread rolls in a bag. We'd take them out and we distribute those, but we were so relieved.
We used to call them cannonballs or something.
Cannonballs.
One thing I forgot to mention, in 1970, as Prabhupada was setting up these standards, George Harrison had just financed and produced the Radha Krishna Temple albums, and the 45 especially had come out. And Prabhupada was listening to this here in New Dwarka, And when he heard Jamuna singing Govindam Adipurusham, it felt such ecstasy from that. He said, I want you to introduce this here in New Dwarka as greeting the deities, and every temple that comes here, I want them to follow that standard as well. So all over the world, they play this Govindam prayers sung by Jamuna for greeting the deities, which Prabhupada started here in his world headquarters, New Dwarka.
Haribo!
So we go out 5 days a week on Harinam, and then on the weekends, on Saturday, we would leave after breakfast, stay out, take lunch out there. We would like peanuts and raisins and fruit, and then we would chant in the afternoon some more. Then we would come back and we would go to Hollywood Boulevard on Friday and Saturday night, or sometimes Westwood too. But in the weekdays, we'd come back, take a bath, and then go to the Bhagavad Gita class. So this was very much encouraged. We go to Bhagavad Gita. I remember once it was getting a little sparse, and then Prabhupada wrote a letter to Rameshwar about how the Sankirtan devotees, I heard they're not coming, and they should come like that. And so Prabhupada encouraged the morning and the evening program very much.
How long do we go to, Swabhas? I'm happy. I just want to make sure.
8 o'clock.
Okay.
There's about 7 more minutes.
No, if you're happy, I'm
Just one more thing about Shalavati. When she was the head pujari in charge of deity worship for the whole movement here in New Dwarka until she left for Dallas sometime in 1973. So there was like a 1 month transition where she started training Jaya Tirtha to become the next head pujari. Prior to that, Jaya Tirtha and Dayananda were running the Spiritual Sky Incense Company, which was essential for our Harinam Sankirtans. We would give, everyone knows from those days, we would give out packs of Spiritual Sky Incense and pass out back to Godheads and collect donations in front of the Harinam parties. So when Prabhupada sent Dayananda to go to London, Jaya Tirtha took over running Spiritual Sky until Shalavati left. And that's how Jaya Tirtha segued into being the great pujari he became.
They were saying about the early temple room. It used to be here with the pews and like that. And where the altar was, there was a full organ, pipe organ, just like you're picturing. And the pulpit was right here. And, well, anyway, so many things. But just this one. Bhavananda was here at that time, and we were spray painting. We were painting everything white, and then we're going to put a coat, not the chairs, but the floors. And so Bhavananda was in this corner, and there was a door, right where Balaram is, there was a door that used to go upstairs to Prabhupada's quarters. So Bhavananda spraying the white undercoat with a spray coat, and the door opened, and it's Srila Prabhupada, and he almost painted Prabhupada's socks, and we're all in work clothes, and we all offered obeisances like that. And Prabhupada said, oh, what is this? And they were explaining what was going on, how we were, And then Prabhupada said, turn towards the organ. I forget exactly how it started, but Prabhupada sat down, they turned on the organ, and Vishnu John was here, and Vishnu, turned it on. Prabhupada sat down with one hand, playing it like a harmonium. Prabhupada, this is the morning tune. And, some say, yeah. And then Vishnu Jana Swami, very intelligent, said, Prabhupada, there's foot pedals. And Vishnu John got down on his hands and knees and was moving Prabhupada's feet to playing the different, echo tones and all the different tones. So you got Prabhupada playing the morning tune with one hand, Vishnu Jana Maharaj moving his feet. He was a brahmachari at the time, at this giant pipe organ. Devotees flooded in. We had madungas, we had kartals, with Prabhupada leading this kirtan on a huge church organ. And I remember thinking, if you went outside, this, like you see in the cartoon movies, the buildings on wings, just floating off the ground. This was a transcendental moment.
You had mentioned about the white paint, and I really want to congratulate Savas Prabhu. Some years ago, when this room was all white and he painted the walls yellow.
That was just the undercoat. White was just the undercoat.
I was a little surprised at first because it was white before he brought it back to yellow. But if you read the letters that Prabhupada wrote in 1970 and 71, he was very specific in his instruction to this temple and all. He wanted the temple walls to be yellow. And Savas, you did that for Prabhupada. You brought it back. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. So, I think we only have a couple of minutes left. I would just like to thank our panel. Thank you very much for our nice enlightening evening. Yes. Yeah. As you can see, they were just starting to get going. You know how old people are. It takes them a while to get warmed up. So they were just getting warmed up. So we're going to do round 2 tomorrow. Yeah. And tomorrow we're going to see a nice video from Karandar Prabhu. Nice video about the installation. So much nectar. We wanted to save it for the end. So please.
One more thing about tomorrow, Savas. We're going to be describing the incredible glories of Rukmiṇī-Dvārakādhīśa that followed the installation.
Yes. So, again tomorrow at 6 p.m. till 8 p.m., right here in the temple room. Please come. I beg you, please come to hear this once-in-a-lifetime situation. It's very nice, and we'll hear some more ecstatic stories as we did this evening. Now, another thing, Hari Bol. So, another thing is that tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m., for a couple of hours, the Russian congregational members, they've hired out a open-air bus, double-decker. And they're requesting a lot of the Prabhupada disciples to come.
Everyone should.
Yeah, everyone, but specifically they want a few more Prabhupada disciples. Put you up on the top, on top of the bus. Yes, there she is, Mayuri. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Where are we going?
So it'll be a couple hours. You're going to go through Santa Monica, Venice Beach, probably Beverly Hills area. And there'll be like loud chanting of the holy name as the bus travels around. They use them for tours. So anyway, tomorrow 9:30 a.m. and it'll go till 11:30 a.m. So if you can come, please do. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Haribol. So we've invited Amal Kirtan Prabhu, so he's going to lead a little kirtan for the evening arti.